Hi all, I'm Sneha and in this video we shall see how to create a single VM cluster. Horizontally scale a single VM cluster to a 2 VM cluster and scale a 2 VM cluster to a single VM cluster. This feature is intended for Exadata Cloud customers who would like to run single instance workloads on ExaDB-D and cannot run them in a multi-node VM cluster due to licensing requirements or customer preference. Now, prior to this release of this feature, all ExaDB-D VM clusters required at least a minimum of 2 VMs, and databases running in those VM clusters were all multi-node rack. So here are some key customer benefits. BYOL customers do not require a rack license to run a database on a single node cluster. It lowers cost for use cases like dev test, where only a single instance database is required. Single VM clusters support all cloud automation features. It eliminates the need to balance multiple PDB or CDBs across multiple nodes. It allows non rack compliant applications to safely run on ExaDB-D, and customers can add VMs to the cluster to online scale out a multi VM cluster and drop VMs to online scale down to a VM cluster. Now, here are some considerations. Although databases running in a single VM cluster are rack capable, they do not support any rack HA features and they are confined to a single VM. So, during rolling maintenance, the entire cluster will be offline as there is only a single VM. And in the event of a VM failure, all databases will be offline until the VM is restarted. So, if the underlying server fails, the VM will be unable to restart until the hardware is repaired. We strongly recommend using DataCard to create a standby database when running on a single VM cluster. You can move a single VM cluster from one physical database servers to another by adding a VM and dropping the original VM. Performing such a migration while the database is up and running requires a rack license as your database will be running in a 2 VM cluster for a short period of time. So, to avoid the rack license requirement during such an operation, you must shut down all databases during the add drop operation. So, let's see how to create a VM cluster on a single VM. So the process of creating a VM cluster on a single VM is identical to creating a VM cluster on multiple VMs. The difference is you only need to select a single physical database server to host the VM cluster. So start by going to your infrastructure detail page, click on the create VM cluster. So this will bring the create VM cluster page. Provide the display name, provide the cluster name, select your Exadata infrastructure, select the database version, okay, here you change the DB server, so where you actually select a single DB server. So you can see the resource allocations for VM, that is you're going to put the number of OCPUs and the local storage. You can configure the Exadata storage here, add the SSH key and provide the network settings. Provide your hostname prefix. Select the license details. And click on Create Exadata VM Cluster. So it is now provisioning a single VM cluster. So if you see here, the single node cluster is not configured for high availability. So click on the work request and you can monitor the work request from here. So as you can see, the Create Cloud VM cluster, that is the single VM cluster provisioning, has been successfully completed. So it has created only a single node. You can select and see the VM cluster details here. So the VM count is 1. Now let's create a database on the single VM cluster that we just provisioned. So in the main page of the VM cluster, select database, create database, provide the database name, unique name, the version, specify the database home details, provide the administrator credentials. If required, configure the database backups and click create. So if you see here, the database is now being provisioned. So you can also have a look down at the pluggable databases. We shall now see how to scale out from a single VM cluster to a 2 VM cluster. So go to the virtual machines, add virtual machines, and select the other DB server and add virtual machine. So if you see here, the node 2 is being provisioned. You can also monitor the work request. So this has succeeded, and then you go down to the VM cluster details, and if you see here, the VM count has also changed to 2, and you now have 2 nodes added to your VM cluster. So you can check the details here. The database instance is now available on both the nodes. So adding the node is an online operation and you do not require a downtime. Now let's scale it back from a 2 VM cluster to a single VM cluster. So again go to the VM clusters. So instead of the add virtual machine, here you click on terminate. So whichever node you do not require, you need to remove, just click on terminate. Provide the name of the VM. Okay, and click terminate. So as you can see, this as the VM has been removed. And the VM count as seen here is now back to 1. So you can also see the node. There's only a single node that is available in the VM cluster. That's it in this video. Thank you for watching.